A lot of people are surprised by the results of the election. All the polls were wrong. Can you give an explanation for why Trump won?
In this election, people were more hesitant to express their views about supporting a political candidate, and I think people were more hesitant about supporting or viewing or voicing their support for Donald Trump. I think that we assumed that because Donald Trump was so different, that it made sense that less people were going to actually vote for him. But I think in the long run, we're going to see that, unfortunately, people do, for the most part, vote with their political ideology. I think that in some way, Republicans were just as closed-minded as Democrats were about people in the other party. But I think that the difference is that Republicans were more energized.
Okay, this has been an intense election. Has this affected your personal relationships with family or friends?
I would say that to some extent, yes, that this election has affected relationships. Everyone will say that we have very polarized elections in the United States. They last for a long time. They're pretty immersive. People's personal beliefs get very, very wrapped up in what the election is about. And I can understand that, especially if people are directly concerned about what the president will be doing to them as a group or as an individual. But what I would say is that a lot of people are very critically thinking about how politics should affect their relationships personally. A lot of people, at least in my group of friends, are talking about, should we be blocking people that disagree with us? Is it a problem that we block people that disagree with us? What kinds of speech can we encourage and still have a safe environment? And so while I don't know what the answer to any of those questions are, a lot of people are talking about how politics affects their relationship. And I think it's good that people are aware that they do very deeply affect their relationship, and that as a result of people having such different and sometimes confrontational beliefs, that it can have real effects. And I think that it's good that we're starting to acknowledge that. It might help get rid of some of the negativity if people understand that they're letting a presidential election ruin perceptions about most of the world. So I think it's good people are talking about that.
A lot of people are concerned about the results of the election. Can you maybe think of one positive point?
As far as a positive point about the election, and I want to be careful here because it's easy for me as someone who's in the middle class attending a private college to feel comfortable about the election. So what I would say is that it might make my discipline more critical. I think that a lot of people are going to be very skeptical of people in political science, of people who are pundits, because in a way this time we were so wrong. And so while that's not directly a good thing for people who are worried about their rights or who are worried about violence, it might help us better approach some of the problems, or at least some of the way that we think about elections in the United States now that people are going to be asking better questions. And I think hopefully liberals that are in the intellectual elite in the United States will be held to a higher standard. And I think that that's ultimately a positive thing. That's not much of a, that doesn't really help many people who are worried right now. And that's certainly not to say that a lot could happen in that time before that sort of criticism turns into a good thing, that something could happen in the meanwhile. But I think that that ultimately could be positive.
Okay. A lot of people that are worried are now going to the streets for demonstrations here in Washington, D.C., but also in other cities of the U.S. What do you think about those demonstrations or protests?
I think that it's perfectly natural for people to protest a result of an election, and I think if we're being honest, this election is much different than other elections. But what I would say is that I think it's ultimately a positive thing. The vast majority of these protests are peaceful. Both political parties tend to protest their beliefs. Sure, you'll get instances of violence when either party expresses its beliefs in a protest, and that should be something that can be dangerous. But overwhelmingly, these are peaceful protests, and people should have the ability to express their political beliefs through protest. I think that that's something that's very important. as a part of any society.